The coronavirus added a wrinkle to Joe Biden's big wins last night in Michigan, Idaho, Mississippi, and Missouri. He canceled a rally instead of addressing a small group in Philadelphia as he moves closer to clinching the Democratic nomination. Ed Mills is a Washington policy analyst at Raymond James and joins us from our D.C. bureau. And our very own senior columnist Rick Newman is here with us at the desk. Ed, let me start with you here. Now that Joe Biden apparently or is inching closer to getting this nomination, as the market studies some of his policy proposals, are they really market friendly?
Well, I think that it's all about a comparison. So compared to Bernie Sanders, they're market friendly. Compared to some of the deregulatory agenda and kind of other proposals of the Trump administration, maybe they're a little less market friendly. But I think what we look from a market perspective is that we certainly got the Joe Biden bounce last Monday, last Wednesday, after he won South Carolina, after a big Super Tuesday. So I think near term, obviously, all of the trading sentiment is going to be on the health and economic impact of COVID-19. Longer term, as we get closer to November, I think that the kind of probability of a Joe Biden presidency and kind of what he would do, that's when the market starts pricing that in. We'll be looking at what happens on tax cuts, what happens on some of his picks for who would be the Secretary of Treasury. Right now, it seems to be a debate between maybe Jamie Dimon or Elizabeth Warren. Ultimately, those decisions would have a significant impact on what signal that the Biden kind of campaign would be sending as what they would govern if they have that opportunity.
You know, Rick, the next Democratic debate to be held in Arizona will be held not with an audience because of fears over COVID-19. I guess the question is, will there be a debate? Do you think Sanders is going to drop out before that even happens? My guess is he will stay in at least that long. I think Bernie Sanders is going to stay in for a few more weeks. He has the money to stay in. I don't think he's going to just blithely accept that his revolution is abruptly over. I mean, he's a believer in this revolution. He's been talking about it, you know, even when the votes aren't there. So I think he's going to stay in. And I think he wants to be on the debate stage. I mean, I think that's one reason. And honestly, I think if we could actually have a debate with just two people, I think that's what we actually want, is a two-person debate. And you know, if the audience isn't there, so much the better. It will be the most substantive discussion we've had, rather than, you know, you have to get in your 10-second zinger and everyone tries to manufacture these, you know, sound bites that'll do what, you know, go viral on social media. I think we'd have a very substantive debate that would be good for voters.
Ed, you mentioned Joe Biden and taxes. Help investors understand this. Is he as unfriendly tax-wise as some people would suggest?
Well, I think you look at the Democratic kind of primary process overall is that every Democrat has come out in favor of some increase over the Trump tax cuts. He probably is one of the less aggressive folks as it relates to this. And it would all depend upon what type of government that he would have. One thing that the market is starting to price in or starting to look at is if the response to COVID-19 gets worse, that is one of the biggest threats to the Trump presidency and increases the probability of an all-Democratic government. In that scenario, you would probably see an increase in corporate tax rates, not all the way back up to 35%, but does it go from 21% to 25%? You would see some changes to individual taxes and probably some changes to investment taxes. That gets offset somewhat in terms of some of the fiscal stimulus that we would expect out of a potential Biden administration, something on infrastructure, something that helps out kind of the middle class and lower wage earner consumer out there. So it's going to be a debate. He does represent a potential for higher taxes, but it really does, really come down to the makeup of Congress and kind of the general economic climate that we'd be facing come January of next year.
If I could just add to that, so Biden's actual proposal is to raise the corporate rate from 21%, that's what Trump cut it to, up to 28%. And a lot of people think that if Democrats did have Congress, well, a compromise number might be 25, which is what Ed just referred to. Also important to add, people may not be aware of this, there's a lot of confusion about these various health plans, but Biden does not support Medicare for all. So Medicare for all is Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren's out of the race. race. Bernie Sanders is probably going to be out of the race eventually. So I think Medicare for all is off the table. What Joe Biden does support is a public option, so a Medicare-like program for people who cannot get affordable insurance in the private market, and they could then buy into this government program. Very different from Medicare for all, but still a heavy lift in terms of legislation. It would, however, leave the private insurance market intact.
Ed, before we let you go, what's the appetite right now for a stimulus package in response to COVID-19 in Washington, D.C.? Do you feel like there is bipartisanship with things like a payroll tax? We're hearing that some Republicans may actually oppose this.
Yeah, so this is what I was on the phone with investors all day yesterday about. I think what I look at kind of the debate building in D.C. is that there's absolutely a strong appetite to do something, but the timing and the scope is what's uncertain. I think where we are with the president, he's in brainstorming ideas. We're going to get a lot of wild headlines like we had yesterday, where he's throwing out ideas, seeing what will stick. From a Republican perspective, I think they've been a little bit more reticent, a little bit feeling that this is premature. But when you look at the proposal that the president floated yesterday, which is bringing the payroll tax down to zero through the election, that's at least $300 billion worth of fiscal stimulus. So we're looking from an administration that barely asked for $1 billion at the beginning of this fight to pivoting quickly into the hundreds of billions of dollars. Democrats are going to be much more interested in sick leave, covering health care for those who have COVID-19, food for students who are out of school. A couple of those other programs we're at least 2 weeks away before we could get a deal done. But the market, I think, is starting to look at saying D.C. is going to do something. We just want it sooner, and we want it bigger.
The market certainly does. Ed Mills, Rick Newman, thank you both very much.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.